All right, this topic is data monetization. We'll talk a little bit about what data monetization is shortly. I am Ried Thiel. I am with AWS. I have been there over 7 years. I used to be a pro-serve, but now currently I am a manager of solutions architects in the private equity. So we deal a lot with the very largest private equity firms in the world. We manage 176 of them, and then all of their workcodes that are related to it. So that's kind of my background. All right. If you happen to have seen, reInvent, or watched our YouTube, Swami said data is the genesis of modern innovation. Anyone into some more details and talked about how a lot of companies have to make this mind shift that data is about reinventing your business, not just reporting on past results. So something to keep in mind as we start doing this. Swami is our Vice President of Data and Machine Learning, as it says there. He has now also just been promoted to be a member of our S team, which are considered the very top individuals at all of that. So he literally now reports directly to AWS, not just Amazon. So what we're going to talk about today is what is data monetization and how some of our customers using data to make money or other things. So when I say data monetization, what do you think about?
Providing data to your client as per demand. I know there are more use cases. Visa gaining, as per their last reports, last 2 years, Visa gaining more data on data monetization, more money on data monetization than on commission for processing payments.
Yeah.
But what they are doing, I don't know. But probably maybe providing somebody data, but I remember that it is something different.
Yeah.
Carbon footprint data providing carbon footprint energy consumption or materials consumption data as a part of the produced materials.
Yeah.
It's one of the widespread use cases for manufacturing. It is not about selling this data separately, but about value proposition for companies, for clients. And it also can be benefit if you collect this data and provide it as a service. Data as a service could potentially bring benefits as belonging to company that is working on green economy, and sometimes some countries in Europe provide government help for companies who collect this data and provide. This is kind of monetization, but not direct, because you get taxes benefits because of having this data. That's all I know.
So those are some very good examples. And that is what I do want you to keep in mind. Data monetization is not just selling your data. It's actually providing business value with your data. So for instance, we released Code Whisperer. Another one of our competitors released Copilot. They have nothing to do with actually selling your data, but by using data, they make their developers more productive, right? Being more productive can lead to new products, can lead to new avenues of revenue for that company. So when we think about data monetization, we actually think about how you provide value to your business. Which then brings us to this curve. And this is very important to the way we think that companies need to start shifting their mindsets. So as you can tell by my gray hair, I have been doing this for quite some time. And I have seen all these different shifts, like when I walked through that history museum, a lot of that stuff I have seen grow over the years. If you think back to the way enterprises were in the past, they would gather data and then they would report on that data for past results. That's really all they were caring about was, hey, look what I did in the first quarter versus what I did in the second quarter. It was always about comparing what we had done in the past. We also very much worked in a big box sort of way, because before the cloud came along, you'd have to make huge amounts of procurement for your servers. So if you were going to do a data strategy, you kind of had to think 2-3 years down the road on what it was going to look like, and go out and procure all that hardware, procure all the software that you're going to use, and then build this massive data model. that made a lot of companies very defensive in their initiative, right? It was very long-term thinking. They were here just to help the company look at what the data was, report on things. And those things are still important, right? We still always want to look at past performance and want to learn from those things. But we need to start shifting our thinking to being more offensive and looking for ways that the data can help grow the value of our business. And one of the things that's very important in order to do that is we have to stop thinking just as tech individuals. So recently I ran a presentation for a company. We were trying to actually help them figure out how to modernize. And we spent the first 2 hours just understanding their business. And all the tech people finally had gotten so tired, they're like, "Are we ever going to talk about tech?" So we are going to talk about tech, but you can't talk about tech if you don't know what the business is doing. And that's what we're asking everybody to do, is to change that concept. You need to start thinking of yourself as business owners as well. Because you do know things that CEOs don't know. They don't know how the data should work. They don't know what the data looks like. They kind of they look at maybe something else another company's done and say, "Give me that report." But you know the data. You understand where it came from, especially if, like, say you're in manufacturing and you're bringing in the data on all these machines. Well, it wouldn't be enough to just collect the data and then report, "Oh, these machines have been operating healthy." But what if it can start to predict the health of those machines and keep your manufacturing going longer, and now it's going around the clock, and you can do preventive maintenance, proactive maintenance instead of reactive. So that's very much what we're talking about with this curve. We're looking for organizations to connect financial results to becoming that data-driven. Any questions there? Does that scare anybody in the room? Because it's very important to start thinking like owners of the business. It's just such a much more integral part of it. Now, what we see been happening a lot is that data is turning out to be a rapid value generation for the next 5 years. Based upon some data that we have collected, the compound annual growth rate is over 25% for small and medium businesses that are using this data-driven approach. That's huge. I mean, every company would love to see 25% year-over-year growth. Your AWS, when you see that kind of growth, that's why AWS and Amazon stock has done so well, it's because we have huge amounts of growth in the cloud computing division. By doing that, having that mindset, you can also achieve this kind of things. The most important thing, I think, is being that I'm at AWS, is you can now be agile. Right? That's what the cloud has allowed us to do. Rather than go out and procure a massive server farm and a whole lot of different tools that may or may not meet your needs, now you can start to procure services, servers when you need them and when it makes sense. And you build upon your successes. So you no longer have to take this big bang approach. You can take a small part of the business, try to iterate on that, find a good value there, and build upon that. Because sometimes things might not work out. Now you can do this a lot faster, become more agile, and you create self-funding flywheels. So now you're not sitting in front of a big CFO and doing your budgets and saying, "I need $2 million." Now you can come and say, "Look, I need $10,000 to go try this out." It's pretty easy to get that kind of thing. And then if you've shown some success, they start giving you more, you start doing more things. So agility is key. It's one of the biggest benefits we see out of the cloud. Now I want to just talk about, so we had mentioned data monetization. These are the 3 pillars that we think that you can create value with data. And I'm going to sort of talk about some of the examples on how some companies have done things here. So the obvious one, and most people think about, is marketplace. This is where you're selling data, buying and selling data. The example here that we have is FactSet and Goldman Sachs. I don't know how many people here are familiar with FactSet, but FactSet provides huge amounts of financial data. So they're tracking everything that's happening on Wall Street. And they're keeping track of all those filings that public companies make. And they capture all this data, but they didn't really know how to get it into the hands of their customers. without a big sales force. That's what they were doing in the past, right? I mean, just the way we were always selling data, you send a sales force out there and they're always talking. Well, with AWS Marketplace, and specifically in this case Data Exchange, FactSet quickly was able to put their data on Data Exchange. Goldman Sachs, we put them together. So we've actually done consulting for both of these companies. Goldman Sachs then used that data to create better products for you as their customers. So now Goldman Sachs became a buyer of FactSet data, but by using some of their own information, which is what like an LLM is all about, right? You get some data and then you augment it with your own data. Goldman Sachs was able to create some better products for their customers and be able to make them more successful as well. The second area, and this is actually where we see the most innovation going on right now, is in product. Amazon.com is a perfect example of why we succeeded in shopping versus a lot of other sites that came before us, and that really had to do with the recommendation engine. Right? So in the past, everybody had all the data on what you had purchased, and then afterwards, and you left the site or whatever, you got an email that said, hey, here's some products that might interest you. Well, Amazon was able to integrate that recommendation engine into real-time buying. So literally, right, we're always giving you recommendations right there, and we keep you on the site and continue to have you buy. Calm is a perfect example of a company that took data and changed their behavior. So Calm is an app for helping people meditate and just bring down a little bit more peace in their life. In most companies that have an app, what they're trying to do is drive more adoption of the app and more use, right? Facebook. So all they want you is to be on Facebook and constantly getting their ads. Well, Calm really doesn't want that. They don't want you on the app. They want you meditating, and they want you doing these other peaceful things. So by using the data that they had gathered over all these years, and they have a very large user database, they were able to redesign the app. It kept you off the app more, but gave you more meditative exercises to go do on your own. And it just made it a much better experience for you. ADP is another perfect example. Probably everybody in this room has worked for a company at some point that was using ADP for their payroll. Well, what ADP has recently added to their products is the ability to tell if they have an employee retention future problem. So they know your salary, they know what the industry is doing, so they can actually say, hey, look, you know, right now you're underpaying your employees by 10% of the market. You might want to make an adjustment now instead of waiting, you know, going back. You know, in the past we would have run reports and said, oh, why did we lose all these employees? Now we can be, you know, with ADP's product, they're looking out to the future. The third category that we see a lot of creation of value is here in just changing your processes. Gen AI is a perfect example that we hear a lot about things that we're doing customer contact centers, we're doing ordering at McDonald's, things like that. Well, this auto insurance company decided to start taking their data from all the calls they've been doing over all these years and feed it into this new system. They changed how they did their customer support. Completely redid it. A lot of it became automated. They were able to save $800 million in the first year in their customer contact center solution. And their CSAT scores, everybody know what CSAT score is? Customer satisfaction score. Their CSAT scores went up by about 10 to 15%. So it's never a good thing to just get rid of my customer support and everybody's unhappy, right? They made their customer support better and also saved themselves a lot of money. So $800 million didn't go to create a new revenue, but if you saved your company $800 million, you'd love 1% of that, right? If you not that you're going to get 1%. So then so the next part here is the pillars of execution. And this is where TidyB comes in and lots of other services. First thing is to make sure you have a good technical platform. Gen AI is the big thing right now. A lot of companies want to know how they can make money with Gen AI. Well, what do you have from a data perspective? We don't have a data strategy yet. Okay. Then you don't have your technical platform ready for Gen AI yet. So you got to make sure the technical platform is ready. Then you have to have a data-driven culture. You have to have the people like us who believe in the data and understand the business and how we can help drive that value. Without the individuals that actually understand data and how to drive that and help make decisions going forward, not necessarily just look at past results. And then the last pillar that helps in here is governance. And when we say governance here, we're not talking about guardrails and being super secure. What we're actually talking about is earning trust with your customers. This talks about setting up processes, for instance, on making sure the data is relevant and refreshed and things like that. Because you can imagine if you're buying financial data from FactSet and the data hasn't been refreshed in a year, it's not going to do anything. So governance is very key. That make sure that you have the right process and that the right people have the right data. You don't want everyone in the company to have access to especially PHI or PCI data. So again, that's where there's some part of that guardrails, but it's just making sure that people can do their jobs in a trustworthy fashion. Because you would hate for your customers to think they had access to all your customer records. All right, so this goes back to why the cloud. AWS has democratized this data capability. Pay for what you use. You don't have to go out and make a whole bunch of things. If something doesn't work, you get rid of it. You can operate at any scale. We have so many customers that start off tiny. Is anybody here familiar with A Cloud Guru?
Yes.
Right? That's how you can get trained on AWS. A Cloud Guru was a teacher sitting in Australia, and he tired of teaching, and he went in his basement. His wife said, "You can take a few months to go do this," and he builds this platform that was completely serverless on AWS. He just sold that company for $2 billion to Pluralsight. And he had originally bought Linux Academy. So everybody's heard of Linux Academy, right? Well, his A Cloud Guru and Linux Academy did the same thing. A Cloud Guru spent less than $100,000 a month on AWS and served 10 times the customers of Linux Academy. They spent $2 million a month on AWS because Linux Academy was all server-based, monolith and very old school and hadn't changed. So again, operating at any scale, you can continue to grow these things. Start where you are. Grow as you need. Lots of paths to upskill. And we have lots of industry-leading technologies. And with our partners, like ThinkCap and Momento and all these other companies that are here, we've got all kinds of great tools that you can use, and you only have to pay when you use them. This is how we now envision people doing data. Like I originally had said, we talked about companies in the past that often procured good hardware. Now, be agile. Start with the vision. Just spend a couple weeks, maybe a month, figuring out the vision, and then start iterating. Go do a sprint. Go try part of the business. Go out there and change marketing, then change sales, then change whatever else there's out there. These will build upon each other, just like you've been doing in your development practices all along. Same here. This is kind of a little bit more of a breakout of how we look at that data monetization. Talked a little bit about data exchange and how that's super important. People license and enrich the data, very important in today's world. In my private equity world, barter is actually extremely important because a private equity firm like Blackstone has thousands of companies in their portfolio. Not all of them are on AWS, but the ones that are on AWS, we have the ability to actually federate their data and share data amongst themselves, which allows Blackstone to not only see a particular company and how they're performing, but how they also perform related to their peers. And they can help companies make decisions on how to better perform, especially in a certain market. So federation of data is very important, and this will become more and more important because you're going to have trusted partners, and that can help a lot. On the product side, we have a lot of machine learning discovery that's going on. That's a lot of what Code Whisperer does for you. Targeted analysis, QuickSight is a big thing that we use at ours, which have Power BI, Tableau, all these things will do that. Personalization, I talked a lot about that. Amazon.com, that's what we obviously use. Very personalized towards what you're doing. And then processes, creating dashboards, creating monitoring, feedback. Big thing that we do on AWS is we don't like there to be a NOC anymore. Everybody know Network Operations Center where people sit there and stare at screens and call people. We expect you now to be building systems that monitor, self-heal, fix themselves. All the things you can do to as you learn over time. Today's world, we cannot talk about anything without talking about Gen II and how it also comes together. So this slide is just to tell you about some of the things that are going on and some of the pretty cool things that I like. So back in the marketplace, obviously everyone is standing up an LLM at this point. We're trying to figure out how they use some of these public LLMs and enrich the data. So lots of stuff that a lot of companies are doing around that. There's stuff that I'm personally playing with in my group on how we can just make our lives a lot easier with Gen AI. A lot of different stuff going on in products. I don't know if anybody here has used Canva, image generation, right? So a lot of things that just, again, you need the data to do these kind of things. What I find actually pretty interesting is what we're doing, Amazon Prime Video and Amazon Ads, what we're doing here in the advertising space. What you're going to see fairly soon, so it's already been going on, you've been getting banner ads since you've been on the internet. And they've gotten more personalized over the years. Now, for the most part, you and I can talk about a product. The next thing I know, I got an email or I got a text from that product, right? It's just, we're seeing more of that. Well, what we're about to do is in Amazon Prime Video, you've seen it happen more and more over the years, but there's product placement in movies and television programs. So you might see a can of Coke, something like that, right? Well, now that content is going to be dynamically generated based upon your preferences. So if you're in the Chinese market, it's probably not Coca-Cola with the red can and the, says Coca-Cola, but rather, I don't know what it says in China, but it probably says something different, and all of a sudden that can is going to be more home to you for what you're doing, or especially now with the Korean shows being so big, Squid Game and stuff like that. Most of what was going on in Squid Game, if they had advertised, it would have. But now we're actually going to be dynamically placing products in movies and televisions. You'll see it already in Thursday Night Football.
The question is, they're already doing that in the K-dramas, as you mentioned.
Yes.
Like the fried chicken place.
Yes.
It's always BHC or something like that. So are you saying that they're changing it based on who is watching it?
Yes.
That will be a different product each time? Or
Yeah.
if you're watching it in a different country?
Correct.
Like in Italy, it could be a pasta.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember such a use case. I don't remember the supermarket, but they offer it to the daughter of one father.
Yeah.
Just for pregnancy.
Yeah.
Based on her change in food behavior.
Exactly. Those are a perfect example, right? You got a daughter who's starting to mature and goes through different parts of that life cycle. Now they're putting the products in more.
They actually offered her also Pampers and so on. And the algorithm was right. She was pregnant.
Yeah.
So
it is getting a little scary on what they do now. So that was about it. Just had a couple more minutes. Obviously, at AWS, we'd love to help you out. My team is around specifically if you're in if a private equity company happens to own you. I always get involved. We have lots of account teams that help you. We have data monetization workshops. If you don't have any use cases that are already in mind, we do have what we call our digital innovation workshops, where we actually help you iterate. So for instance, here in California, there's a new product been offered by Better.com's mortgage business. And it's, so if you work at some of the big companies, Amazon, Microsoft, we get restricted stock units as most of our compensation. Well, Better.com is now offering a mortgage that I use the RSUs as my down payment. So even though they haven't vested yet, they assume that they're going to eventually vest, and they let me buy a house. Now, it's only right now here in California, but all of that work came out of doing a digital innovation workshop. All right, we still got 3 more minutes. Yep.
I have a question on convincing companies to turn to this. You know, you can piece together this ANOVA expression of
Yeah.
information. And so how competitors comfortable sharing the kind of information?
It's always going to be the hardest part to overcome is this trust. So I can't guarantee how you're going to go about it. You're not going to really get competitors' data unless it is also available through something like a fact set. But like, obviously Microsoft is not going to share Azure data with AWS, and we're not going to share with them. So it just depends upon the markets you're in. Now, in our case, I get a little bit luckier being in private equity, because even though these companies might be in somewhat of a competitive market, the private equity firm is making sure there's still some synergies on what they could share. So now that you've got sort of that parent who can tell you to get along, you get help, that helps a lot. So in the VC market, it would be kind of the same thing.
Portfolio companies to share.
Correct. So even though they're competitors, because they have the same parent, they sometimes will be a little bit more willing to work together. But if you don't have anything like that to bring it together, it's hard. Very hard. Yes?
Can you speak a little bit about data privacy and how that comes into play with monetization?
And that kind of comes here as well too. So privacy is super important. So like FactSet, that's how they make their money. So they want all the data to be as public as possible. But they don't want it to, they have to make sure that when they sell it to you, you don't just turn around and do it to them, right? So that's one of the great things about the data exchange is when you buy it through the data exchange, it's only available to your AWS accounts. You cannot then turn around and share it. Now you could obviously figure out a way to take the data, eventually export it, and then sell it too. Can't really stop that kind of stuff. Privacy is very important to everybody that's out there. But in the case of Goldman Sachs, right, they took FactSet's data, they enriched it, and then in a way they're selling it. Right? They're using that data to continue to make that product. Yeah. Anything else? All right. Next
Very
person.
inspiring. No
That's
questions.
good.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, anytime.